My name is Arya and I'm 22 years old. You may be wondering how a girl my age ends up living with her uncle, especially given the situation I'm about to share with you. Believe me, I never expected this to happen. I'm studying to be a graphic designer, so I spend the majority of my time drawing, designing, and doing freelance work. Life hasn't been easy. After my parents divorced when I was younger, I traveled a lot trying to work things out, and I ended up here residing with my Uncle Sal. It wasn't intended. Be sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue to bring you more intriguing real tales like this one. And don't forget to watch this video till the finish because this story is going to be quite entertaining. It all started when my mother had to go to work, and I needed a place to stay. While finishing college, Samuel, my uncle, was the only family member who could take me in. He is married to his wife. Catherine has lived here for a few years. In a nice house in the countryside, far from the city. I thought it would be just another move, living in a peaceful, quiet place for a while. But things turned out differently than I expected. It's been a few months since I moved in, and I've gotten used to the house, the routine, and the calmness here. Or so I thought. But today, things are different. I'm writing because something happened. Something that began when I walked into Samuel's room while he was sleeping. Before I explain, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on everything that happens next. Let me tell you a little bit more about Samuel. He's not like most uncles to me. He's always been more of a mentor than just a family member growing up. He taught me how to ride a bike and fix things around the house and even gave me my first car when I turned 18. So when my mom needed someone to take me in while she was away for work, he was the obvious choice. Maya's thoughtful, patient, and very kind. But it wasn't just him I was moving in with. His wife, Catherine, had been in the picture for a while. They married 2 years ago, and I wasn't too sure about her at first. She's older than M. Started offering me some cooking, cleaning, and basic household ideas. We didn't become great friends, but it wasn't as uncomfortable as I had imagined. Things were returning to normal, but I'd recently noticed something I couldn't explain. The more time I spent with Samuel, the more I felt drawn to him. The way he smiled at me, his hand occasionally brushing against mine, the little glances he'd give me when he thought I wasn't looking. It was different than before, difficult to describe, but I couldn't ignore it. I began to sense a building tension between us, and an energy that I couldn't shake. I know what you're thinking, Arya. What are you talking about? He's your uncle, and I know it sounds weird, but this sensation, this connection is irrefutable, and I tried to push it away. I told myself it was only my imagination, but every time we were alone, it felt as if an invisible thread was tugging us closer. Here's when things become interesting. After supper one night, I was working on a project in my room when I heard footsteps in the hall. Samuel had been asleep for hours, and Catherine was out with friends, so we were alone for the evening. At first, I didn't think much of it until I heard the door to his bedroom crack open. I hesitated for a little minute. I wasn't sure whether to leave him to rest or go inside, but something drew me to him. I entered the door carefully, trying not to wake him. He was sleeping on his back, one arm behind his head, his face relaxed in slumber, and the warm light from the window formed shadows on his face, making him appear calm and nearly untouchable. I stood there for a time, my pulse beating, blood pouring to my ears, and my cheeks warming. I'd never felt this way before. Perhaps I simply wanted to stare at him, or maybe I didn't know. My thoughts were interrupted when I accidentally knocked a vase off the shelf by his bed. The sound made Samuel stir, his eyes fluttered open, and for a brief moment our gazes met. I saw confusion in his eyes, but also something else I couldn't quite place. He blinked a couple of times, trying to focus on me, and let out a low groan. Arya, what are you doing here? My heart pounded in my chest as I struggled to come up with a response. I didn't want to seem like I was snooping, but I didn't know how to explain myself. My mouth felt dry, and I couldn't find the vethafith. I didn't mean to wake you, stammered, feeling embarrassed. Samuel sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. He gave me a kind smile, the one he always gave when he was patient with me, but there was something different in his eyes. Today it made my heart race. He studied me for a moment before speaking again. It's okay, he said softly. You know you can always come talk to me. Arya, I'm here for you. I nodded, but my mind was racing. I didn't know how to handle this strange feeling in the room. It felt heavy, and I could feel my breath getting faster. I just wanted to talk. Said my voice barely a whisper. Samuel's smile faded slightly, and I thought I saw a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, but it was gone in an instant. He patted the bed next to him, motioning for me to sit. Come down here, then you can always talk. To me, he said again, his voice warm and inviting. I stood there for a moment, unsure of what to do, but something inside me urged me forward without thinking. I moved closer. Sitting beside us, the tension between us was now palpable. Thicker than ever, I could feel the heat of his body next to mine, and his subtle cologne filled the air. We were so close that I could hear his breathing and feel the rise and fall of his chest. With each breath, my heart raced again, and slowly, almost in slow motion, I looked up at him. Our faces were so close that I could feel his warmth. His gaze was soft, almost uncertain, but there was something else there, something that made my skin tingle. Arya, are you okay? Samuel asked softly. Before I could answer, my lips parted, and without thinking, I leaned in closer to him. I could feel the blood rushing to my face, and my heartbeat seemed impossibly loud. What was happening? What was I doing? I couldn't explain it, but everything felt so intense, like the air was charged with something I couldn't deny. Samuel didn't pull away. His eyes searched mine with a quiet intensity. He didn't speak, but I could feel his breath quicken just like mine. The room felt warmer. The silence between us thickened with unspoken words. My mind was that everything had led to this moment, this unpredictable, inexplicable moment. I couldn't stop myself. Slowly I leaned in, my lips trembling as they brushed against his. At first it was tentative, a question, a hesitation, but as his lips responded softly and gently, I couldn't hold back anymore. My mind screamed for me to stop, but my body refused. I needed this, I wanted. This, I couldn't deny it anymore. Samuel's hand gently cued my cheek, urging me closer with his other hand resting beside us, lightly grazing my skin. I could feel the heat of his touch, and it made my skin burn. The kiss deepened, and soon it was hard to tell where his lips ended and began. Everything outside the room disappeared. It was just the two of us, tangled in this undeniable connection that made my mind race with confusion, guilt, and an overwhelming sense of rightness. What were we doing? Why did it feel so necessary? There were no words to explain it, no logic behind it. He pulled away just for a moment, his forehead resting against mine. Our breathing was heavy, each inhale shaky, each exhale was slow. I could feel his pulse against my skin, and it matched the erratic beat of my own heart. Arya. His voice was soft, strained with something we shouldn't, but I wasn't sure I agreed. Something inside me refused to acknowledge any reason to stop. Slowly reached for his hand and threaded my fingers through his. He didn't pull away. His fingers curled around mine as if he were holding on to me just as much as I was holding on to him. Our eyes met, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. The weight of everything hung between us. Should we? Could we? My hand instinctively moved to the back of his neck, pulling him back to me and kissing him again. This time there was no hesitation, no fear, no uncertainty, just the overwhelming need to be close to him, to feel him. Samuel's shin slid down my back, pulling me closer. The contact of our bodies made everything feel impossibly intense. I didn't know where this was going, but I didn't care. There was only the moment, and the desire to stay in the space where nothing existed except for us. My heart raced faster, pounding against my chest as his lips moved to my neck, pressing soft kisses against my skin. I could feel his breath against my ear, sending a shiver down my spine. It was unlike anything I had ever felt before. Intimate, consuming, and deeply wrong in the best possible way. "You're sure about this?" he murmured against my skin. His voice is thick with desire. "I don't want to hurt you." I closed my eyes, trying to find my voice. Everything inside me screamed to stop, to pull away, but I couldn't let the longing be too much. The need was too strong. I didn't want to think anymore. I didn't want to reason it out. I just wanted to be with him. "I'm sure," I whispered, my hands moving over his chest, feeling the heat of his skin beneath my fingertips. "I want this, Samuel. I want you." His lips found mine. Again, and this time the kiss was deeper, more urgent. There was no going back now. The world outside of this room didn't matter. There was only the way he made me feel desired, needed, and alive in a way I had never felt before. The room seemed to close in around us, the light dimming as the intensity of our connection grew. Every touch, every kiss felt like a promise of something more, something we couldn't explain. But we were both so willing to explore. I could feel his heartbeat steady and sure, matching the rhythm of mine. And though part of me still fought against the reality of what was happening, a much larger part of me surrendered completely. I wasn't just kissing him anymore. It was more than that. It was a connection I couldn't describe, a bond that went beyond words, beyond explanations. "I've wanted this for so long," Samuel said softly, his breath hot against my lips. I could barely comprehend his words as my hands roamed over him, feeling the muscles in his chest and the heat of his skin, the way he responded to me. But there was no turning back now. There was only the pull between us. The way we seemed drawn to each other in a way neither of us had ever expected. Time seemed to stand still as we lost ourselves in each other, in the quiet rhythm of our kisses, the warmth of our touches, and for the first time, everything felt right in the quiet stillness of the room. We were no longer uncle and niece. We were just two people connected by something deeper, something far more intense than anything I had never known before. The air between Samuel and me hung thick with tension. Neither of us moving, neither of us speaking. The silence was suddenly shattered by the sound of the front door opening downstairs. Both of us froze. My heart raced in my chest, and I quickly pulled away from Samuel, panic seizing me. Had we just done what was happening between us? The guilt washed over me. But it was mingled with something else, a desire I couldn't ignore. I could feel the weight of it, the push and pull between what we had just shared and the reality that we were so deeply entangled in something we couldn't easily untangle. Samuel didn't move immediately. His gaze was fixed on me, but his expression was unreadable. I could feel the heat between us, the lingering closeness that hadn't yet dissipated. "Arya," he whispered, his voice strained, but before he could say anything more than the sound of footsteps echoed up the stairs, Samuel heard a voice. I instantly recognized, my heart dropping into my stomach. It was Catherine. I quickly jumped off the bed, my breath coming in short, sharp gasps. I didn't know what to do. My mind raced in every direction, but I couldn't come up with an answer that would make sense. Was I really going to face her after what had just happened? At the door to Samuel's room creaked open, and there she was. Catherine standing in the doorway with a surprised look on her face. Her eyes flicked between Samuel and me in confusion, flickering across her features as she took in the scene. "Samuel, what's going on here?" she asked, her voice laced with uncertainty. But there was something else too, an intuition perhaps that something was amiss. I could feel the blood drain from my face. Catherine's presence was like a chilly shower, causing an immediate sense of unease. I found myself unable to explain or justify the events that had transpired between Samuel and myself. My throat felt constricted, and I struggled to articulate my thoughts. I stammered, not sure what to say. Samuel, sitting up on the bed now, his expression blank, seemed equally at a loss with his hand rubbed the back of his neck, clearly embarrassed, but not sure how to explain. Either Catherine's gaze shifted to him, then back to me. There was an unspoken understanding between us, something that neither of us was ready to confront. It was as though in that single moment everything shifted. Catherine knew something was happening, something that wasn't supposed to be, but her reaction was not what I expected of anger or disappointment. There was only a deep, unsettling sadness in her eyes. She walked into the room, closing the door behind her. Her presence was commanding. There was an odd stillness in the room. Now, like the calm before a storm. "Arya, you need to understand." Something Catherine said softly to her voice, surprisingly gentle. "There's more to this than you realize. More than either of you understand." I looked at her, confusion flooding me. What did she mean? What more was there in the silence in the room? It felt heavier after Catherine left. Her words had left an imprint on both of us, and while there was still so much confusion in her understanding, an offer of guidance had given me something I hadn't expected. Hope Catherine wasn't angry. She wasn't ready to cast us aside. She was giving us a chance that felt fragile and uncertain, but still a berm. There I glanced at Samuel. His face was still a mixture of guilt, confusion, and something else I couldn't quite place. He was avoiding my gaze. Now, with his hands nervously rubbing together, I knew he felt the weight of what had happened, the way our worlds had collided in the most unexpected and complicated way. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that none of this had been anyone's plan. Things had unfolded in a way that was beyond any of our control. The only thing I knew for certain was that we couldn't ignore it. We couldn't pretend like nothing had happened. Catherine was right about that. Feelings, the confusion, it all had to be addressed, and it had to be faced. There was no running from it, Samuel. I whispered, my voice shaking slightly. "What do we do now?" Samuel looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of emotions. "I don't know, Arya. I don't know what to feel or what to think. I don't know if I should be angry or ashamed or if I'm allowed to feel anything at all." His voice cracked with vulnerability, and I could hear the internal struggle in his words. He was a man torn between the deep connection we'd shared and the loyalty he had to Catherine, his wife, and my aunt. This was the kind of situation that couldn't just be sorted out in one conversation. It wasn't that simple. I took a deep breath and walked toward him. The space between us softly, "But I think we need to talk to be honest with each other. This is too complicated to ignore." Samuel nodded slowly, his face serious but not angry. "Yeah, I know. I just don't know where to even start." I took a step closer, my heart racing but my voice steady. "We start by admitting what happened, what we felt, and what we still feel, and then we figure out what comes next." He nodded again, his expression softening just a little. "It's not going to be easy, Arya, but I want to understand. I want to understand what's happening." Between us, I took his hand, the contact both comforting and charged with unspoken emotion. "I don't have all the answers, Samuel. I don't know what happens next. But I'm not running from this, not anymore." We sat in silence for a moment, each of us lost in our own thoughts, trying to process the overwhelming complexity of the situation. There was no clear path forward, no map to guide us through the maze of emotions, guilt, and confusion about what Catherine had offered us. It was something that felt like the lifeline. The freedom to face this together, to confront the messy, tangled web of feelings that had caught us in its grip. I looked at Samuel again, his eyes meeting mine, and in that moment I knew that whatever came next we would face it with honesty. There was no perfect answer, no easy fix, but there was a chance for healing, for understanding, and maybe, just maybe, something more. As I leaned back, my mind racing with possibilities, cities. I couldn't help but think of Catherine. What she had said, her calm maternal guidance, had opened a door that I hadn't known she existed. Rejected us, she hadn't condemned us. Instead, she had given us room to breathe, to work through the complexities of what had happened. But what would happen next? What would Catherine say if we told her? How deeply we still felt. Would it be too much? Would she ever truly forgive us? But those were questions for another time. Right now it was just Samuel and me. Sitting in the silence of our shared uncertainty, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. The only thing we could do was take the next step, whatever that might be, and somehow together we would figure it out.